For Kenyans today, the issue of gay rights is really a non-issue.
This week on Christian World News, President Obama's message of gay rights is rebuffed in his ancestral home.
Plus, Dr. Kent Brantley tells about his heroic battle against Ebola, how he fought to save others and then himself.
And she conquered depression by serving others, how this quiet hero of the faith has won her reward. Kenya's leaders stand strong for biblical truth. Hello, everyone. I'm George Thomas.
And I'm Wendy Griffith. U.S. President Barack Obama took a strong stand on his recent trip to Kenya. Was it against radical Islam? No, it was in favor of gay rights. But then he was rebuked by the president of Kenya himself. Dale Hurd has the story.
President Obama held talks with Ethiopia's leaders on counterterrorism, human rights, and regional security. He's the first sitting American president to visit the East African nation. Obama wrapped up a two-day trip to Kenya Sunday, urging the homeland of his father to root out corruption, treat women and minorities as equals, and to protect the rights of homosexuals.
I've been consistent all across Africa on this. I believe in the principle of treating people equally under the law, and that they are deserving of equal protection under the law, and that the state should not discriminate against people based on their sexual orientation.
But in a tense exchange, Kenya's president rejected Obama's message on gay rights, saying it was one value that Christian Kenya does not share with the United States.
The fact of the matter is that Kenya and the United States, we share so many values. But there are some things that we must admit we don't share. Our culture, our societies don't accept. This is why I repeatedly say that for Kenyans today, the issue of gay rights is really a non-issue.
In Kenya, homosexual relations carries a punishment of imprisonment. In this overwhelmingly Christian nation, many residents shrugged off the U.S. president's lecture on gay rights.
Of course, the way President Obama talked about gayism and what have you, lesbianism or transgender, whatever, according to him, you know, we took him as an American. He was answering like an American. He was for, but according to our African culture, the Christian beliefs, we say no.
Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Thanks, Dale. There are fears the Ebola virus could be resurging in West Africa. Some 500 people are quarantined in Sierra Leone. Last year, the worst Ebola outbreak in history killed thousands of people in the region.
One American missionary doctor was right in the middle of it, trying desperately to save lives before the deadly virus nearly took his own life. Take a look.
For 6 weeks last summer, Dr. Kent Brantley worked non-stop treating dozens of Ebola patients at a hospital in Liberia. Ebola is highly contagious and deadly, claiming up to 90% of its victims. Despite taking extreme precautions, Brantley started feeling sick, and 3 days later heard the devastating news that he too had contracted the deadly virus. Christians around the world began praying for Brantley's recovery. His mission organization arranged to have him evacuated to Emory Hospital in Atlanta, making Kent Brantley the first person infected with Ebola to be brought to the United States for treatment. Miraculously, he survived and was released from isolation 3 weeks later. He and his wife Amber have written about their experience in a new book, Called for Life: How Loving Our Neighbor Led Us into the Heart of the Ebola Epidemic.
And recently, I spoke with Kent and Amber Brantley here in our CBN News studios. Check it out. Are we out of the woods yet, or are we still seeing cases of Ebola in these countries?
There are still 20 to 30 cases being diagnosed in Sierra Leone and Guinea every week. Last week, there were 26 cases between those two countries. Liberia was declared Ebola-free in May, but at the end of June had a resurgence of cases and is now on their countdown once again to Ebola-free status.
And clearly, Amber, you know, you see this, the world has kind of moved on a year later, but I'm sure folks there are still fearful, right? Are they still afraid?
I think they've learned a lot in a year's time, and sure, it's still something to be afraid of, but they've taken great strides. We saw a big shift in our visit back in June because there were wash stations beside every public place and store and church and school, and I think the awareness has become such a higher level that that's really changed the culture there.
It's interesting. There's so many problems in other parts of the world. Why go to Liberia? Why put yourself in such harm's way?
God called us to serve people in need. To do that, you go to where the need is. And we saw a great need for basic medical care in Liberia. We went there to serve people with the compassion that Jesus has had on us. And that was really our motivation for moving there. And when the disaster of Ebola came to our area, it only heightened our sense of purpose for being there to serve people, to have compassion in the midst of this increasing need.
You knew leaving when you left your husband behind. Did you think the possibility was high that your husband could contract this deadly virus?
I really didn't. I really thought that I trusted in his procedures and the steps that they were taking at the Ebola treatment unit, that he felt safe, and so I felt safe.
Yeah.
But we knew we weren't immune to that. Just because we're Christians didn't make us any less vulnerable than everyone else. And so it wasn't a complete shock because I knew he'd been getting sicker in the days before his diagnosis, and but it was a horrible feeling.
How did you deal with that horrible feeling?
It got worse after they started the infusion of the ZMapp, the experimental drug. For the first half hour or so, my symptoms got worse. I had this violent rigors, this shaking, and my breathing was getting worse. And that's when I looked at the nurse and said, I don't know how you're going to breathe for me when I quit breathing. I can't keep this up.
Was faith an integral part of your response and just getting through the day every day?
Yeah, absolutely it was. And the upbringing I had and in the scriptures and in hymns, and that's really what saw me through, were the words of David and the Psalms, or the old hymns that we sang growing up, is really what sustained me during those difficult times, and that's how I could pray.
You've had a year to look back. How would you categorize America's response?
I think we should look back on it now and realize that our healthcare system is, while things did not work perfectly, it was adequate for preventing a large outbreak of this disease.
Okay, the book is called Call for Life, How Loving Our Neighbor Led Us into the Heart of the Ebola Epidemic. It is available wherever books are sold. Thank you so much for all you do for the Kingdom of God. Great to have you guys on the broadcast. Thank you so much. Kent and Amber had much more to say about their experience. You can watch the full interview at our website, cbnnews.com.
Coming up, pictures of faith, how this Cuban businessman shares the gospel through his photography.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. 8 years ago, my husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphans Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
Inside every child is a hero, a leader, a friend to others, someone who helps out, who does the right thing, who dreams of what they can be, but they still need our help.
What should I do? What should I say? How should I feel?
That's where Superbook comes in. It provides moral and spiritual truths through situations children can relate to, teaching God's Word to the children you love. Join the Superbook DVD Club and receive Superbook's newest episodes as they're available, plus 2 copies to share with others, all for your gift of only $25. Get Superbook today and watch the miracles happen.
In China, believers are fighting back after officials in Xinjiang province tore down more than 1,500 crosses from church buildings. You can hear Christians praying and weeping as they watch their crosses being removed. Some are practicing civil disobedience by strapping themselves to crosses to keep them from being taken away. Others are building hundreds of wooden crosses and putting them on homes and all along the roads. This takes place as China carries out a nationwide crackdown on human rights attorneys and advocates. More than 200 have been arrested since July 9th. Here in America, Representative Chris Smith says the Obama administration should make these issues a priority when China's president visits in September.
The issue of religious freedom must be addressed by the administration during a planned summit in September. But we must ask whether this summit should even take place. There are many issues in the U.S.-China relationship that need attention, but does President Xi Jinping's, given his bold disregard for human rights and his brutal suppression of dissent, does he deserve to get the red carpet treatment in Washington?
You can learn more about this ongoing story at CBN Chief International Reporter Gary Lane's blog, The Global Lane, at cbnnews.com.
Well, getting your hands on a Bible in Cuba isn't so easy, but one group is on a mission to change that. More than 80,000 Cubans will receive a Bible thanks to a donation from the International Missions Board. The shipment comes as the evangelical church is growing in the island nation. Bibles have not been sold in Cuban bookstores for more than 50 years, so the only place you can get one is at a church. Churches rely on Bible donations, and they've had a hard time keeping up with the growing number of believers in recent years. The Cuban Council of Churches, along with the Baptist Convention in Cuba, are distributing the Bibles in more than 1,000 churches all over the island.
It is a privilege God gives us to take Bibles to the churches where there is so much need. We're in the process right now of sending these Bibles as quickly as possible to our churches. The grass withers and the flowers fade, but the word of our God stands forever.
Amen. Well, the Bible shipment is a big encouragement for the Cuban church, but it's not enough. At the rate the church is growing there, Cuban church leaders know they'll need thousands of more Bibles, and soon, George.
Yeah, a small number of Cubans are becoming private business owners under a recent government change in the government rules there.
A few Cubans, like photographer Eduardo Perez, have done quite well. In Perez's case, however, it goes far beyond making a profit.
Eduardo Perez stepped out into the unknown when he got permission to start his own business in Havana 5 years ago. His love for photography led to professional success. Today, Edo's studio is not only financially successful, it also allows Perez to support a cause that's close to his heart.
Este negocio siempre fue, de verdad te lo digo, es una herramienta que Dios nos ha dado para.
This business has always been a tool God gave us to talk about Him. Whether it's photos for clients or personal work, we always want to highlight the beauty of God through photography. That's what we're called to do.
Eso es a lo que fuimos llamados.
From the beginning, we were very clear that this should be a business that serves others, not just a means for financial gain. As we've gotten better, we have done well financially. That has helped us support other ministries.
We began with nothing, then we expanded our photography to other goals, like social work that we've done in communities, in schools.
Edo's studio became known for unique crowd shots of the Christian community, one of the fastest growing groups in Cuba, yet virtually ignored by Cuban media. The Perez have documented public activities of the church and even managed to display those pictures in secular exhibitions, a major accomplishment in Cuba.
We are trying to capture highly attended church activities on a national level and create a photo report so that it's documented. We want the people in the eastern and central parts of the country to know what's being done in Havana and vice versa. Every chance I get, I show other believers that we're more than they think, that more things are being done than we think, that God is opening more doors than any of us realize.
Edo Studios, a Christian business that's making a difference in Cuba. Stan Jeter, CBN News.
Thanks, Stan. Up next, what do two Regent University students, a 95-year-old American woman, and orphans in India have in common? See how their lives were tied together with a common thread of love.
CBN presents The Transforming Word. Pat Robertson records powerful verses of health and healing.
Let all that I am praise the Lord. May I never forget the good things He does for me. He forgives all my sins and heals all my diseases. My youth is renewed like the eagles.
A new DVD and audio CD set by Pat Robertson. The Transforming Word, verses for health and healing.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. 8 years ago, my husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphans Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
Kids, we want them to grow up knowing God's Word. But in today's busy world, sometimes we could use some help. The free Superbook Kids Bible app has fun stuff your kids will love. They'll have a blast learning the Bible, playing great games, watching cool videos,
Follow me.
discovering heroes in the Bible. They'll have fun while they learn God's Word. The Superbook Kids Bible app, available on iTunes and the Google Play Store.
Well, 2 years ago, 95-year-old Connie Vitolo felt she had no purpose in life. Then she started giving her gifts to others and touched many lives in the process.
That's right. We're sad to report, though, that Connie has now passed away. So to honor her memory, here once again is her inspiring story. These orphans in India don't know it yet, but they're getting something special for Christmas this year. Coming from someone they've never met, half a world away in Virginia. 95-year-old Connie Vitolo has spent the past year making blankets for the children, one stitch at a time. Well, how many blankets have you crocheted for the orphans so far?
A dozen, 12, and I'm on my 13th
On number
one.
13 right now. And I understand that you pray over every blanket.
Oh, I pray for every one of them. I pray to Jesus and I thank Him every day. When I finish one, I said, thank you, Jesus. Don't let me die before I finish my blanket.
Not long ago, Mrs. Vitolo didn't care whether she lived or died. After a bad fall, she had to leave her New Jersey home and move in with her daughter in Virginia. Before long, depression set in.
And I say, I wish Jesus would call me home. But my daughter says, no, He don't want you yet.
I prayed. I said, Lord, you know, I'm putting it all in your hands and I'm trusting you that you're going to make a way for her to have, you know, to find her purpose here, you know. And He did.
Anne saw an ad on a bulletin board that volunteers were needed to make items for orphans in India. Mrs. Vitolo found her purpose.
she really has a lot of joy just doing this. She can do it all day long, and she just doesn't get tired.
What that lady is doing, it's amazing, because something that is giving her life, which is also breathing in life and nurture to a child in another country.
Ranjit Abraham knows what it's like to be without a purpose. He grew up in the shadow of his father, a well-known pastor in India who founded 17 orphanages.
I never wanted to be a part of this, because I don't know how it is in this country, but in my country, when you become a pastor and you come to the bottom of the food chain.
Ranjit was pursuing a graduate degree at Regent University when an unlikely partnership emerged.
Out of all my classmates, there's one in particular that I don't necessarily get along with, being an African-American woman from New York City, having a very strong personality, and he being an Indian male from a very chauvinistic country. So we didn't get along. But God had a bigger plan.
Ranjit and Aisha are now best friends, part of a movement called glocalization, encouraging people to serve at a local level for global impact. After finishing graduate school, Ranjit returned to India. He and Aisha work across the globe to provide his father's orphanages with more than basic needs, like playrooms for children who never had toys, or homemade blankets to cover them with warmth and love. They see Mrs. Vitolo as a perfect example of a glocal servant.
To have a little Italian grandmother in the middle of America to say, I'll take my frail hands and I will create something for you that's a practical need.
Versus like, man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at your heart. What does that mean to us? But when you see what Mrs. Vitolo is doing, it makes complete sense, you know?
Oh, here he is.
Once a year, Ranjit returns to the United States. This time, he made a new friend.
Hello! Raji.
Yes!
How are you? I'm Connie. I'm the one that make blankets for your little orphans.
Oh my God, so good to see you.
Yeah, you are good looking, buddy.
Am I? Do you want me to show you some pictures of the kids that are gonna get this?
Yeah, I would love to see them.
Can you see that? That's them.
Ah.
They've come from the streets, you know? They don't have a parent.
Right.
They don't have a mother. They don't have a father.
What I want. People that don't have anybody. And if this one of these can cover them when they're cold, I'll be happy. I wish I had one here. I would hug them and kiss her. Jesus has a purpose for us all, but I never thought he had a purpose like this for me. And I'm very happy and honored and humble. Jesus, I love you. I thank you and I praise you all my days until the day I come home to you.
And today she is in the throne room of God, singing his praises before him. So
yes,
fantastic.
A
life
great lady.
well lived.
Such an inspiration for all of us. Sure. You know, the best joy in life is giving to others.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We'll be right back.
CBN presents The Transforming Word, Verses for Health and Healing, a new DVD and audio CD set by Pat Robertson.
I'm going to teach you some of the principles I've learned as God has revealed them to me about how His kingdom works.
The Transforming Word will show you how the Word of God can transform your life. You'll learn to experience God's miraculous kingdom and see how speaking the words of Scripture will bring power to your life and to those you love.
I've also recorded selected verses for you that you can listen to, that you can memorize, and that you can speak aloud, so that you can see the transforming power of God at work in your life.
Pat Robertson records powerful verses of health and healing.
Oh Lord my God, I cried to you for help, and you restored my health.
Get the Transforming Word. Available now.
When you give, smiles grow bigger. When you care, homes are happier. When you comfort, the hurt goes away. When we all come together to love, miracles happen.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
It's one of the most famous songs in America and the world.
And the story behind Amazing Grace and the man who wrote it has come to Broadway. Angela Zatopek brings us that story.
It's a song that's been heard in churches, schools, and yes, even presidential speeches.
Amazing Grace.
Well, now it's hitting a different kind of stage right here in New York City. Amazing Grace is on Broadway.
Why can't you see? Lighting up the stage with Tony Award-winning actors, Amazing Grace tells the story behind the famous hymn and its author.
It's the story of John Newton, who was a horrific slave trader, who through his faith became the man who wrote the hymn and started the abolitionist movement in England.
One day wandered into a library and pulled a book off the shelf at random that said John Newton. I had no idea who he was. So I sat and I read this book cold, and this amazing story opened up.
Newton, the slave trader, became a slave himself when his crew betrayed him in West Africa. Serving an African duchess, he endured the same type of abuse he once handed out. Let the wind and the waves wash away the fool I used to be. Rescued years later, Newton converted to Christianity and eventually became a prominent voice in the abolitionist movement.
I thought the world needs to know about John Newton. I was embarrassed. I didn't know anything about him when I started this project. And now, of course, I feel like the world needs to know John Newton.
Despite its graphic depiction of the slave trade, composer Christopher Smith says it's for all audiences.
Nobody in this industry originally believed that there was any audience for this. The desire to be loved in spite of your faults is not a religious impulse or a secular impulse. It's a human impulse.
We'll make a song.
Immensely relevant and resonant story for our time right now, and hopeful about second chances and about making change and about starting with yourself to make a bigger change.
Producers guarantee that audiences will leave inspired by its musical score.
This song is unique in so many ways. It's crossed gender and generational boundaries for ages, as it seems to unite people at every turn. It also seems to give people a sense of hope, which is something our country desperately needs right now. I'm Angela Zatopek, CBN News, New York City.
Thanks, Angela. And it truly is a song that has been sung all around the world and across many religions as well.
You are so right. It's a beautiful song and a great movie as well.
It is.
Now on Broadway.
That's right. Thanks so much for joining us this week, folks.
Until next week, from all of us here at Christian World News, goodbye and God bless you.